Have you ever wondered what the world will be like when you're gone? Long after, of course. How strange would you find the world to be in 1,000 years? And more to my point, how strange would that world find you to be? That is what our story is about tonight. It is a tale known as The Legacy.
I don't know how long it's been or how I survived at this point, but I guess I owe you an account of how I came to be in that crater you found me in. I think this story begins only this morning. While traveling to study in Cairo, I heard a story of an anomaly. Strange tectonic movements had revealed a huge underground chamber. When I went to see it for myself, I was disappointed to see the local government had already blocked off the area. And unfortunately for me, I was too interested to comply with their warning signs. I was able to creep past the caution tape and found a hole, only a few feet in diameter. I took out my phone and shined the light in, but the bottom was farther than my phone's light could reach. Suddenly, I heard a heavy breathing. I turned, but only caught a quick glimpse of a deer skull before someone pushed me into the hole. I fell down into pitch blackness. For so long, I ran out of breath from screaming. Then, all at once, I hit the hard ground. Everything hurt, and I heard a ringing in my ear. Yet, somehow, I was still alive. And after a minute, I even managed to pull myself to my feet. I had to feel around on the ground, but I finally found my phone and pointed its light away from me. And I saw that I was in a massive chamber. The walls and ground were all smooth. Even as dazed as I was, I could make out the ancient stonework that must have made this cavern. Looking around, the chamber's ceiling must have been hundreds of feet high. I couldn't believe it. There was no way I could have survived that fall. But there I was, standing in an underground room with a ceiling too high to shine my light on. In the room itself were these large rectangular objects made of glass. Inside were what looked like remains, which looked like maybe they were bronzed. Even after ages, they had this reflective quality that my phone's light caught, like polished metal. The remains looked about the size of a person, but looked nothing else like a human. I couldn't figure out what these things could have been in life, or why they'd be preserved in such a fashion. Feeling defeated, I turned my attention to the rest of the room. And that was when I saw the Great Wall. It loomed high and stretched as far as I could see, and on this wall were colorful murals depicting what I can only assume were gods or mythological heroes. The first of these murals showed a strange humanoid shape. It had no features, save for what I could assume were beams of light streaking out from its body. The figure stood over various other shapes. Some were animals, while others were more humanoid. All of them seemed to be posed with their heads bowed down as if worshipping or kneeling before this radiant being. And I quickly noticed none of these images looked Egyptian, except for one, a human female with a feline head and wings posed kneeling beside this being, similar to Isis, though the figure had a halo of light behind its head like those seen in more traditional Abrahamic religions. And far in the corner was a black smear, without a clear shape or point. Something about that patch of blackness felt wrong. Everything else in the mural was bright and colored. It almost looked as if it had been added later or changed to cover up some feature. I felt uneasy looking at it. I decided there was nothing else to do but keep exploring this wall. I walked along its length looking at the various murals. All of them seemed to show this bright light character with the cat-headed female. Every setting looked alive and colorful, but always some distance away was that black stain. I got the dreadful thought that the murals showed the blackness getting closer and closer, and then the murals changed. Where the rest had shown peaceful happiness, they now showed animals and humanoids in bloody battle. Most common were these deformed, vaguely humanoid creatures that were odd, mismatched colors. Some looked to have plants growing out of them, while others were large cycloptic insects. This war that I watched unfold came to an abrupt end, with the black, shapeless mass standing over the fallen body of the radiant being. The setting in this picture was bleak and damaged, and the next picture showed that feline companion standing, seeming to dismiss or banish the strange creatures, with the insects hovering around her. Some of the creatures looked like they were barred by chains or dragged down into the earth itself. Even the blackness seemed to be caught up in this. And the next mural showed the feline being bound in wrapping. It almost looked like embalming. Finally, the last image showed the many trapped creatures and monsters, but their bounds were broken or severed, and at the center of the picture was a large black sun. I felt my hands tremble when I looked at it. I know it isn't true, but I could swear I heard distant drums. I turned away from the mural and took a deep breath until I felt the shaking stop. I don't know how long I walked, but I found myself in a new chamber, one with giant smooth pillars. This room smelled musty and decayed. I shined my light around the room and found a giant mass in the corner. I looked closely at it and gasped in horror. It was literally a giant pile of bones and rags. I staggered back and felt myself hit something. One of the pillars shook and toppled over, shattering with an ear-splitting crash. I froze in horror as I realized that those were not pillars at all, but rather they were massive clay jars, like the kind used in the mummification process. I covered my mouth when I saw a cloud of dust flood out from the broken jar, and then I heard a sound that made my heart stop. A low, thumping groan. Slowly, from the fragments of broken clay, a huge mass of dried flesh started to pull itself free. I heard rattling as one by one the other jars all broke. I felt sick. Those jars had all been full of organs, which now were pulling themselves across the room towards the body that had once been theirs. I was too afraid to shine my light on the pile of bones and rags, but I could hear them moving, a sickening sound of bones clicking and meat straining. And then, suddenly, all the sounds stopped, and I could feel a powerful breeze pushing and pulling in a steady pattern. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, I wanted to not be deep underground with some unnamed god. But slowly, I pointed my phone's light outward, and when I saw what was there in the light, fortunately, I fainted.
Donect itorum convenient.